Yeah.
Good
Good morning,
morning.
Kim. If you guys are here, give me a hello so I can do a little quick roll call. And
Hi, Caroline.
hi, is that Mary?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Mary.
Hi, Caroline.
Hi, Clark. Good to see you again. Well, I don't see your face, but maybe later you'll turn it back on.
I'm getting a little
I love,
breakfast. That's while we get going here.
yeah, I appreciated seeing your smiles and nods yesterday. It's like encouragement for me. Good morning, Alicia. Good morning, Gwen. Good to see you here. I love seeing your assignments so far. Keep them coming. If you didn't get a chance to yet, you can even do homework 1 and 2 at the same time today. And even if you're doing homework 2 today, you'll find out what it is in a bit. You can even continue practice 1 too. You know, it's good for you to be able to start seeing what you're going to create before you even click that shutter. Like I take for granted how like the muscle memory in the brain for me is like so intuitive that I know exactly if I want this look, I'm going to switch to that lens. If I want this look, I'm going to use this focal length, this f-stop, you know. And when I adjust my shutter or my exposure nowadays, like for example, I can go from shooting a single portrait of somebody. Good morning, Rick. Good morning, Joanna. And Rick, are you going to call onto the Zoom? But when I take a picture of like a single person at a portrait, and I need to suddenly have like a big family group, let's say it's a baby shoot, right? It's the baby's first birthday. I'm photographing solos of the baby, and suddenly now let's get mom and grandpa and everyone in the shot too. um, it's to the point where I can quickly change my f-stop because I know, okay, I shot the baby at 2.0 and now I need to go to 4.0. And immediately I would know what shutter speed to change that to. So that's the part where I want to get you guys to, you know, where you don't have to chimp in the back of the camera every time you have to change your setting. And if there's suddenly more people in the group, you can quickly just change your aperture and your shutter and you know you're good. And then when it goes back to the single portraits, you can go back down to 1.2 or whatever you're at, and then change your shutter speed accordingly as well. So one of the things we're going to talk about today in kind of in passing is like the stops, like one stop of light. If any of you have taken, I think it was how do I use this fancy camera? That course, I do go more in details about stops, but you can also Google it too and just see, you know, it's like 1.0, 1.2, 2.0, 2.8, 4.0, 5.6, 8.0, 11, right? So just being able to memorize what a stop is. And then on Shutter, it's like a 30th, a 60th, 125th, 250th, 500, 1000, 2000th, right? So being able to, so I know that anytime I take off one stop of light with aperture, that means I have to compensate with one stop from shutter as a result. So that's how, you know, it's that scale that I was talking to you about yesterday, right? So with your exercise yesterday, that's kind of what I wanted you to see. And if you might not have paid attention at the time because I wanted you to just take the picture, but now I would like you to notice, is that true? When you changed it from 2.8 to 5.6, right? That is two stops of light because it's 4.0 and 5.6. Did you notice that shutter speed also changed by 2 stops as well? So if you used to be at 125th, right? So let's say it was 125th, 2.8, right? So now you're going from 2.8, you went 4, 5.6. That means which 125th you had to go 250th, 500th. Do you see? So pay attention now. I'd like you to look at the settings that you did yesterday. And for those of you who chose to change the bokeh using the f-stops, see if that's true. See how, and it should be pretty close, you know, like some of you might have not properly totally compensated that amount. And so you might have had to fix it in post, but if you got it to be the exact same exposure And somebody asked yesterday, what do I mean by exposure? Exposure is just how much light you're letting in. So if you did get it to the exact same exposure, it should be exactly 2 stops, like a 2 stops trade like that. So we'll get more in, I'll show you more how you can really utilize stops to quickly be able to adjust your settings today. But in the meantime, I'd like to jump into today's lesson, which is about lighting. So if you remember the pyramid that I talked about, right? The very basic is just comfort with your camera. So that's what yesterday was working on, making sure that you were comfortable with your camera. It's not going to happen overnight. You're going to have to continue to practice it. And if you don't use it, if you don't pick up your camera for a month and you pick it up again, it's going to be a little rusty and you'll have to like, you know, familiarize yourself. But it is like getting back on a bike. So, and especially if you can start to understand how the concepts work, it should come back even faster for you. So with that said, like where did my window go? I have too many windows open. I lost the window that changes my slides. Whoops. Okay, now I know I can just use my arrow instead because I can't find that window. All right, so, but that actually saves me time. All right, so let's get into lighting. So how much impact does lighting have? I know I've been guilty of this. I don't know if you have, where you're not quite happy with the light. You're shooting and you're like, like I'll just fix it in post later. Like, because you either don't know how to fix it or you are just too flustered in the moment. And then you shoot it anyway. You go home, you look at it on your computer and you're like, I should have fixed it, right? Because you can fix certain things in post, like if it's slightly underexposed or slightly overexposed, you can easily fix that in post. But the overall lighting that you choose is going to dictate the mood and the feelings, and that you can't really fix. There's a difference between like the light and airy kind of light, the romantic light, and more moody kind of light. And if you did one or the other, you cannot make it go back. Like you can't fix that in post. So let me give you an example. This was a shot that was taken in my studio. So you can see this one, I went for kind of a more, moody kind of image, right? It's like more masculine, so to speak, right? Like just kind of high masculine. In the exact same corner, I made this image. So you can see they look totally different, even though it's the exact same corner. There is no way I can make this look like this after and vice versa. I cannot make this suddenly look light and airy after, right? Because it was the choice of light that I picked. I could brighten it up, but it's not gonna have like this one, I went for more of like that very even light, the ratio of how much the backlight and the fill light coming in on this way, is much closer together. Whereas this one was much more extreme, more contrast. The darks, the shadows was way more dark and the highlights was way more bright, right? So you have highlights way up here, shadows way down here. That's what makes it really high contrast. Versus this is a low contrast. The highlights aren't that, there's not really much highlights and there's not that much shadows either. So as a result, you have like a more evenly lit thing. Yeah, Mia, you got a question?
Yeah, I had a question. So on the image on the left, the light and airy, would you say that's like a 1-to-1 ratio on your light?
Yeah.
And then the other would be more like almost a 4-to-1, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And do you meter?
When I shoot with analog film, I do meter just to be safe. I mean, I do spot checks. this is the other thing that I encourage you to practice with if you can. I used to walk around with my meter and just guess the settings. So I would look at the light and say, I think this is 2.0 at 125th at ISO 400. And then I would use my meter and check if I was right. And then I'd walk into another room and I would check. And that was just kind of a practice that I did that, was, and if you guys, like Alicia did my, my bundle mastermind last in the winter, which I'll offer you guys. I'll tell you guys more about that tomorrow, but where it's a 6-week program where it's kind of like this, where I give you homework, but we do it for 6 weeks. And one of the assignments does involve like that, where like, just check your settings, don't look at your settings and take a guess and just see how good you are. And sometimes I think just forcing yourself to do that makes you more aware of the choice you are consciously making versus, when you just, especially do it by eye, you'll just keep changing the dial until it works without really putting thought into what numbers you just picked. And I noticed that when I sometimes train like some of my interns and stuff, I'll look at their numbers and I'm like, why were you at 1/8 of a second? And it's because they weren't thinking about the numbers. They were just simply turning the wheel until the photo was bright enough, right? So by doing this, it really forces you to think about the numbers that you were intentionally choosing. So yeah, that would be a good challenge next. So today's objective is I want you to understand the effect that lighting is going to have on the mood of your photos. And like I mentioned yesterday, lighting is going to dictate whether it's moody or romantic or fun and poppy. And that is really hard to change in post after. Like yesterday in our group, somebody posted a photo of their children front lit and asked, oh, can you edit this to make it look more light and airy? And that's really hard to do, because everything is just so hot sun already directly lit on them. So in general, if you want light and airy, backlight is the better choice for that. Again, one is not right or wrong. It's only right if it met your goals, right? So if somebody was wanting fun poppy photos of the kid, then that was perfectly lit. But if someone wanted more light and airy and ethereal feeling, then that was the wrong lighting. But again, it depends on what your goal was and the mood that you're trying to achieve. Here's another example of what a difference light can make, right? This right here is your backlighting, super romantic, right? And like I mentioned yesterday, I learned the hard way. When I first started shooting fitness photos, I was using the same lighting because that's what I was doing. And I was like, it's different. It's okay if I like, this could be good for like a yoga or cool down, right? It gives that more feeling of like serene, right? Whereas if you want to make it look like they just had this hardcore workout, this is the wrong lighting for it. And we went with something more like this. When I created this shot and I got to think about how to set up the lighting for here, I honestly, until I got into fitness photos, I was only doing this kind of romantic stuff. And it wasn't until I had to push myself to do something like this that actually made me understand this even more. Because now I was thinking like, okay, I'm always so used to getting flawless, almost shadowless skin. There's hardly any detail in her skin. That would be awful if I did that to his abs though, right? Like suddenly he has no more abs. Like that's the opposite of what they want. So for me, it really forced me to think, okay, when I usually do this, I want the backlight. I expose for the shadow, which means the shadows are all lifted. But if I want this, I actually want hard shadows. So I went for the opposite instead, right? This one, for those of you who have taken All About Light, the difference between big light sources and small light sources, right? This one, I want a big light source. This one, I want a small light source, right? So those are a couple things to keep in mind as you are creating your light and choosing your light for shooting, because you cannot fix the quality of light in post-production. You can fix the what do you call it, the amplitude. You can fix the intensity of the light. You can brighten it, but it's going to brighten everything. And you can decrease it, but you can't fix the quality of it and like some of these contrast stuff, it's really hard to fix in post. So the second objective for today is I want to show you how to photograph in the bright sun. In the winter edition of this challenge, we did a lot of indoor lighting, naturally, because it was rainy outside for most of us. So we focused heavily on indoor lighting, flash, for those of you who are ready for flash. But for this summer edition, I actually want to focus on outside in the bright sun instead. So that's kind of how the difference between the winter and the summer editions are going to be. So for this one, I want to give you an example of how I shot in bright, bright sun, right? This was 4th of July weekend in New York, in Long Island, and it was hot, like not just hot as in bright, but hot, like, in temperature too, right? So we didn't have a lot of time. Like the couple's like, let's get out there, let's get a couple of these pictures and like, my gorgeous venue, and then I want to come back into the AC after. So you have to think really quick on your feet, bring them out there, and again, what's the goal? What am I trying to achieve? Where do I place them? And what angle am I going to shoot them from? And how do I properly light them? And then this was another one. This was for a commercial shoot. When I shoot commercial shoots, they will book me typically from like morning to evening. And I have to shoot all throughout the day, even in the middle of the day. I don't have a choice. I can't say I don't want to shoot during this time. I mean, I can, but I think it makes it harder to make a bid for, right? Like people, when they're hiring you, they want it to be efficient, and they like it when I'm able to say, yeah, I can shoot all throughout the day. I'm going to maximize your time with me. You book me for 8 hours and I'm going to shoot all 8 hours minus lunch break, right? And so being able to use the hot sun and being able to strategically choose which gowns we're going to shoot during golden hour and which gowns we're going to shoot during these hot sun time. Which ones we want to look more edgy and which ones we want to look more romantic. And so these are all like, intentionally used to create a mood. So yeah, like I was explaining, summer edition, we're going to focus a lot on like the all about light part, which is sun and natural light. The winter edition that we just finished, and then I'll launch it again probably in 6 months, is the all about flash, which is more about how to shoot indoors and using strobes and flashes. So today, like I mentioned, for summer edition, we're going to focus on challenges of shooting in the hot sun. And that's what today's objective is going to be about. I'm going to give you tips that you can walk away so that you're able to shoot even in the brightest sun. That way, if a parent comes to you and says, I want you to photograph my child at the park, his nap time, he wakes up from his nap at 11 a.m. and I want you to photograph him from noon to 2 or noon to 1, right? Of course, like right smack in the middle of the day. You can be, okay, I can do it. So here is an example of one of my first weddings that I did. I did not understand lighting. I bought a fancy camera. Luckily, this was like this was my husband's coworker. So, there was a lot of grace there. She knew I was just starting out and she's like, yeah, you want to do it? I'm like, sure. So this was like one of my very first weddings. So many lessons to have learned from here, but this one was one where I really was like, oh man, lighting, like this is something I really got to figure out. Like I don't get to choose. Like prior to weddings, I was able to choose when I shot most of my portrait sessions, but this was the first time I experienced a wedding timeline that said you were going to do the family photos at 1 p.m. And this was up in Napa Valley, in the middle of the summer in August, really hot sun. I thought that's a pretty background. The field looks gorgeous. Stand there. Same thing with this one, like a picture of her bride and her dad. Like poor girl, look at that. Like she's so squinty here. Like he's in his sunglasses because it's just so bright, right? So a couple of things to watch out for if you are stuck in this situation where you find yourself having to shoot at 1 p.m. in the middle of the day. You're going to watch out for hot spots. These are these hot spots right here. Okay, there's tricks on how you can use it, and there's also tricks on how you can play up on it if you want. So with hot spots, look at all these hot spots here, right? The sun is on their face, their shadows on their body, more hot spots here. As a result, you end up with splotchy lighting. And this is really hard to fix in post, because if you brighten this up, everything else gets too hot. If you decrease the exposure here, this is going to get too bright, right? So when you have splotchy lighting like this, it's really hard to fix in post. You're going to end up either having to spend a lot of time masking things out, and none of us want to do that. And especially if you shoot weddings and you're having to go through hundreds of photos, that's just not realistic and not sustainable. So your goal definitely has to be fix it in camera, fix it at that time, at that moment. So quick fixes of what you can do. Oh, another problem that's connected as well is raccoon eyes. So raccoon eyes is the shadows that get casted under here, under the eyes, under the nose, and under the chin. Do you see all those like dark shadows? It looks like they're like football players, right? With the shadows like that. So that's something you have to watch out for when you're going to shoot in high noon like this. So if you're going to, I'll give you the tips after. So the other thing is you have to also watch out for silhouettes. So silhouettes is like this. When you shoot into the bright sun, if you are not on manual mode and you let your camera decide, your camera is most likely going to try to expose for the sky, and as a result, give you really dark people. And again, silhouettes are not bad, but was it your intention, right? So if you were intentionally creating silhouette, that's fine, that's great. But if you are not trying to create a silhouette, and worse, if you are actually trying to create a family portrait and it all came out in silhouette, this would be a disaster, right? So it's really all about what you were trying to create and being intentional with how you use the light. The other thing to watch out for is sun flare. This one is not showing up, but it basically was just a photo where the sun completely ruined the light. This is an example of how sun flare was used well. It's real subtle, and I cut out a lot of the flare. I hid the sun behind the children's bodies, so that way the sun wasn't directly shining in my lens. So as a result, you get kind of that soft filtered light, but not to the point where you get like the ugly flare. This is another example of sun flare. There's a little bit of flare coming in and you see that, but I had it diffuse through the leaves, so it wasn't as bad. Whereas if it came directly into the lens, you'll see like the really muddy kind of flare, where everything just gets all hazy, the subjects are all hazy. And again, if it's like a romantic, artistic kind of shot, that's fine. But if it's a family portrait or just something where they're going to expect to see their faces, that would totally ruin your look. And you can even have fun with it. This was one where I played with the sun flare and intentionally used it, and for something really abstract, right? It's like coming through her eyeball at this point. So this was a double exposure. I photographed the girl first, and then I photographed the palm fronds or whatever it's called after, purposely with the sun peeking right through the leaves. But you can see I also controlled how much of the flare came in by keeping it between the leaf, and I was able to control. If I wanted more, I would move it into more of this area, and if I wanted less, then it would come into this. So I wanted just the right amount of flare to be artsy without totally muddying up the whole photo. Like had the leaf not been here to block out some of it, this whole photo would have just been like kind of washed out and muddy. So what do you do? In this situation, mom says, my child can only be photographed at 12:30 p.m. You get a wedding timeline and they said, you are doing couple photos at 12:30 p.m. What do you do? So here are a couple tips that you can walk away immediately with. This was also shot directly at high noon. You can see how it's totally on their shoulders. Turn their faces away from the sun. Expose for the shadow. When you expose for the shadow, you just want to make sure that their face is all in the shadow, in the shade. And as long as you do that, you're going to get nice flattering looks in their face. You can see there's a little bit of blown out here, but that doesn't bother me. I still think it's like all the important elements of this photo are well exposed for. And it's high noon, that's kind of part of the look that they're out in the field. The only other solution to this, if I wanted to shoot here, would either be to move them into the shade, but again, that would change the scene. Or I would have had to like have a giant scrim. But because you could see there's no shadow, do you see? Like the shadow is directly underneath them. That means a scrim would have had to have been like right above their head to block out that sun. So not realistic in this case. So you make the most of what you're given, right? So if you're stuck in that situation where you have to shoot in this case, like I like to use my hand. Do you guys know the hand method? You can walk around and you can even try it right now. Just move your hand around you like this, and you'll start to see how the quality of light changes. You'll start to see the shadows and the highlights fall. And what you're looking for is like how the shadows fall on your hand, because the shadows are going to represent how the shadows fall on their faces. So you're looking for a part where there's like, you know, the most like flattering light, most evenly lit. And that's how you know their face is going to be well lit. This is another example of shot in high noon, same campaign. Again, I turned them towards the shade. I looked for the lip. There's not much of it. You know, you can see even that like hot sun is on there. There's not much of it, but I looked for the most that I could to get them in the shade or in the shadow, and then exposed for the shadow. When I say exposed for the shadow, I mean that I chose an exposure that made the shadows lit properly. And I didn't mind if the sky blew out as a result. You know, this is another example. I turned their faces away from the sun. If for those of you who like want the blue skies, then you would add a flash to this. But for the sake of today's lesson, I'm trying to just keep it on how to find the best lighting, because whether you have flash or not, like you still have to find this lighting, right? So then once I add a flash to them, then I would expose for the flash. That would make the sky with more color. But for me, a lot of my wedding couples love this kind of more like light and airy, dreamy look, and they don't mind that the sky is blown out like this, because it just looks like you're in a cloud, like up in the sky, right? If it was blue skies, it gives it a very different look. It'll be more like that first photo I showed you with at the castle.
So in this instance right here, did you meter the couple?
Yes. Okay. Yep. I metered for the shadows, which would be for the
So
couple.
you were looking at the darks.
Yep. All right. So the other thing is you want to watch out for your exposure, because you could see, I'm going to show you two photos that were taken just seconds apart. Exact same place, exact same spot, just seconds apart. You see what a difference, right? So this is what I mean by exposed for the shadows. I exposed for them because they're in the shadow. This was exposed for the highlights, which was the sky. So you can see what a huge difference, right? And if I wanted them lit too, then I can add a flash to them. And then that would make them also lit. It changes the look completely though, right? It becomes a totally different look. So again, it's what's your goal? What are you trying to create? So exposed for the shadows, exposed for the highlights. This is a very extreme example that I'm showing you, but to make a point, right? All right, so here, if you're looking for the safest option, if you are still a beginner, lighting still scares you, you know, you're at a wedding and they told you to shoot at 12:30 p.m. And maybe you know, you're not at a place yet where lighting is like the back of your hand. Here are some safe options that you can default to anytime you feel like. This is also a good option if I feel like I'm not connecting with the clients and like I just need something really safe, so that it's one less thing for me to worry about, so that I could really focus on, you know, breaking the ice and bringing them out of their shell, right? So here are your safe options. Seek shade. Look for shade, make sure they're in the shade. I stuck them in a bunch of trees. Now, typically this is not going to be where you're going to create your, remember how I was saying yesterday, like your average, right? If you think of the bell curve, right? You have like all your average photos, majority of photos you take and majority of photos taken in general fall within this middle narrow range. The outliers on the edge though, right? Like that's the stuff where you can start to create like, that's like to me, this is like that 1% type of photo. I don't create, like most of my shoots don't look like this. I don't, and even when I deliver a gallery, there might be only 1 or 2 photos that look like this, right? It's literally like the little ends of the bell curve, right? It's on the extreme ends. Majority of the photos look more like this and this, right? Like more of like your standard kind of photos. So my point is, if you seek safe, you're only going to be able to be in that middle part of the bell curve, the average part. That's not bad though, because they are expecting that. You have to deliver this part, right? You don't have the luxury of coming out to play here until you have completed this part here. So if you need to seek safety, like shade, to complete this part of your mission, then you go for it. Then that gives you more flexibility to go play, on more of the extreme ends after. But you have to also be willing to break out of the safety in order to do some of like the real more creative stuff on the edges. So, but like I said, I'm giving you safe options for when, you're just in a situation where you're like, I cannot think of something else. I just need to make sure that I deliver. Another thing, especially if you are on the northern hemisphere, seek a north-facing wall. North-facing walls are always going to have some sliver of shade. They don't see sun. They don't see, I know for sure, like where I'm at in LA, the north-facing walls don't see any sun if it's truly north-facing. You might get a little bit of sun, like coming out, but worst case is you push them right up against the wall and they'll be in the shade. And then depending on how much, how far back the sun is, you might be able to pull them away from the wall a little bit. But even if you pull them away from the wall a little bit, you might still get them they will still be slightly backlit. Just like how the wall sees no sun, they won't see sun either. So their faces, that is, but depending on how high, like you might get like on the back of their heads and such. But this is always a safe thing to do. Whenever I show up on a set or a location, the first thing I do is I look for north. And I tend to shoot into the south. So north is my back and my camera points to the south. And that's how I know that I'll always be backlit. This is another example of a north-facing wall. I had a sample photo here, but for some reason the internet is not pulling up all my images, but I wanted to show you an example of me. This is of something that I created in front of my garage. So my garage is actually a north-facing wall, so it never sees sun. So I can put up a backdrop here and for the most part photograph. Now, this was a large set that also involved the tablescape. So the north-facing wall isn't, especially midday, doesn't cast enough of a shadow to cover the table. So I put just a white translucent easy up, and it creates this beautiful like diffused light. I'm actually gonna look, I'm gonna pull up the photo that was supposed to show there so that you can see what I was talking about and what I created. But you can see this. Okay, so this photo here, will it let me go big? No, I have to sign in. Okay, this photo here was created in that set right here. So you can see how beautiful, like, and I think Mia yesterday asked me about setting up outdoor studios. This is how I set up my outdoor studio. It's in front of my garage. This photo right here was also set up the same way. Can I make it bigger? Oh yeah, I could make it bigger like that. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so you can see how evenly lit this was. And actually this photo next to it is also from that same shoot too, the details on the table. You see? If I didn't have this easy up here, while I knew my backdrop would be shaded, this table would have been in bright sun because this table's facing the sky, right? So I give myself a little bit of shade, and then you get this beautiful, just diffused, even light as a result. That was in studio with strobes. In studio with strobes, outdoor studio with the easy up. And you can see it gives like a pretty consistent, this was indoor studio with light. But this was in that, my garage, my outdoor studio as well. So I love the results of it. It's easy. If you're still intimidated by flash and strobes, this is a really easy way to get it done. And it works for summer because you can shoot outside. Now, when we get into winter, this is not an option anymore because it's going to rain, right? So winter edition, I'll show you how to recreate the same look using strobes and flash indoors instead. But for the summertime, we can focus on all these outdoor stuff. Okay, so the other option you have is to intentionally use it. Play with the lines, play with the shadows, play with the hard shadows, right? Have fun with it. And that's kind of what I did in this situation here. I love like the lines that came through as a result. But if you notice, I made sure that her face stayed shaded because I wanted her face to still look flattering. But it had just enough of like, you know, the edginess of it with still looking girly. Another thing is you can play with the shadows. I love looking at the floor. So for those of you who took my All About Light, you know, like my shadow trick, like I love looking at the floor and I love looking at shadows because the shadows really help me understand how the light is moving and working. And as a result, you know, I can pick up fun stuff like this, like her little French bulldog, the shadow of her French bulldog. Look how cute is that, right? So, and again, this is kind of like what I was saying yesterday, where like, don't confine yourself too much. Don't come in with such a strict shot list that you forget to just see and take in what's available there for you, right? You want to have kind of a structure in place so that you come in with a game plan, but you definitely want to leave room to just go with it. This is a shot I could not have predicted before going in, unless I actually like have shot at this location before at that exact same time, right? But I don't know how the sun is at that exact moment. It's one of those where you're just keeping your eyes open and open heart, open mind, and just taking it in, you know, and you look down, you're like, oh my gosh, it's like the perfect shape right now for this. The other thing you can do is front light them. You can see what a difference this looks like, front lit versus my backlit photos, right? Look how blue the ocean is. Look how blue the sky is. Now, if you noticed with this, I also did make sure that her face was properly lit. I made sure that the parts of her face I wanted in the sun and properly exposed. And you can even see, you know, a lot. I could dodge, burn. I get mixed up with my dodge and burn, but yeah, I could burn this more if I wanted to. But you know, I did get some detail in the dress even with it like so brightly hot like that. Here's another example, same exact spot, taken just minutes apart, front lit versus backlit, right? So this is backlit. I should have wrote backlit versus front lit just to keep it in the same order. But yeah, so this was backlit and exposed for the shadows, right? Dreamy, airy, right? The grass is not that green. It's a little like washed out, right? But you can see their faces and versus front lit. Again, this was shot at like high noon. This was the little sliver of backlit that I was able to get on them. So I went for it. But I was like, what if we just embraced the front lit? Just went with it, right? And look how green the grass is. It's a totally different feel. It's not light and airy, but it still has a very whimsical vibe, you know, them laying down, the sun. I purposely had her tip her head up so that she wasn't going to get shadowed, like just to make sure that her face was properly lit. So, and their eyes are closed, obviously, because they were looking right at the sun, or their face was right towards the sun.
The storyline
So
is
just
still there.
as you work, yeah.
The storyline is still there, regardless of the difference in the lighting. The storyline is still very, very strong.
Yeah, it works together consistently. It still looks like two friends out frolicking in the field, got tired, laid down, you know, different, and now basking in the sun. And so just be mindful. The most important thing I pay attention to is how the light falls on their face. I'm less worried about the body, unless, for example, like I was shooting for the dress company, so I did need to make sure the dresses were well lit and well placed, and you know, the ruffles were in the like ruffling in the same way. But other than that, you know, like I'm making sure that the face is properly lit, especially if it's for a client, because that's what they're going to want. Here's another good example of the difference between front lit versus backlit. So this was in Joshua Tree, really hot, as you know, hot, harsh light. But what I did is I went for the front light. You could see by the shadows. Do you see how their shadow falls away? This, I wonder what that shadow is. I think that was a rock, actually, a shadow of a rock. But if your shadow is going towards your client, then you know that they are front lit. If their shadow is coming towards you, then you know that they are backlit, right? So in this case, their shadow is all falling towards me. You see how the sky is super white in this case, but you get this really like kind of dreamy, ethereal kind of feel, right? So it depends on the look you're going for. This is bold. The sky is blue, and you know, her pink is crisp, and the face, like, it really comes down to what light you're going for. And honestly, when I shoot, I do both, because while this is super dreamy and stuff, like I typically will also need a proper portrait. And if it's too hazy or dreamy, it's not as traditional, I guess, you know, it's kind of pushing the edges a little. And I want to make sure that I have a photo that mom will also love and grandma will also love and want to buy lots of prints of. So it's just, and sometimes, you know, if you're in a good enough location, it's just a matter of you and them switching spots. Shoot them from the front lit, go around, shoot them from the back lit. The other thing to notice about this photo is, can you see where the sun is? So I'm shooting right into the sun, but as you know, when you shoot into the sun, it's gonna make you super, super hazy. So if you pay close attention, the sun is actually hidden behind this hoop right here. So that's why you see a sliver of it coming through that hole, right? If I had put the sun here instead, this was gonna be really washed out and muddy because it would have been too much sun. But because I controlled how much of the sun came in, I was able to get just the right amount of haze to be dreamy without being muddy. So that's something that I want you to watch out for when you do your backlit shots. So when you do backlit shots, make sure that you're controlling how much sun comes in. Otherwise, you're going to get muddy instead. But it's good to practice and see, right? Part of today's assignment is going to get out there, shoot a front lit and shoot a backlit shot. And so things I want you to watch out for when you do your front lit is watch out for the shadows under the eyes. If you need to, make them tip their faces up to just cut out that shadow. Watch out for your own shadow, because your own shadow might be pointing right at them. So pay attention to that. Take a further step back if you need it. Use a longer lens if you need to not have your shadow be so close to them. If you're going to backlight it, watch out how much sun you're letting into your lens, or it's going to be muddy. So those, and then expose for the shadows. Make sure that the shadows are properly lit. So those are my tips to you as you go out there and play. Whoops. Okay, hold on. I'll start this over. But one pro tip I want to give you is that the difference between exposure between front lit and backlit is actually 3 stops. This is going to change your life, especially when you are shooting weddings and the altar is front lit. So you are shooting the bride walking down the aisle backlit, but as soon as she's at the altar, she's suddenly front lit. 3 stops. So for me, the quickest way is on my shutter. And I just change, let's say backlit is 1/25. As soon as she passes going into front lit, I pop it 1, 2, 3 stops, which is 2/50th, 500th, 1000th. And then now I'm ready for front lit. And if I suddenly move around to get shots of the audience, pop it back 3 stops. And if I move back around, pop it again 3 stops. You don't even have to check your metering anymore, right? So that's one of my quick quick tips for how you're going to do today's assignment. But let me give you, some of you may have seen this before, but I thought it was kind of a good introduction to today's challenge. All right, so that gives you an idea of front light versus backlight. So today's challenge, you are going to go outside and you are going to create a portrait outdoors. Grab your child, grab your spouse, grab your neighbor, your neighbor's child, pet, right? Doll, stuffed animal. And I want you to create one photo that is backlit and one photo that is front lit. Things I want you to look out for, test out if I'm right. Is it really a 3-stop difference? In full sun, it should be a 3-stop difference, but I want you to test it out so that you have the confidence that that's true, because that means that the next time you're in that situation where you have to quickly adjust, you can confidently adjust it by 3 stops and not have to worry, right? You'd like, yep, I know it, not have to check the back of your camera. Other thing I want you to watch out for with the backlit, if you want to push yourself, experiment with the flare. Test out how much flare you're willing to tolerate. How much flare before it just turns muddy. You know, where's that fine line between dreamy, hazy, nice flare versus muddy flare. And then if you're doing front lit, I want you to watch out for any shadows. You know, pay attention to how the shadows that might fall under the eyes and nose and chin. So tip up the head if you need to. You can even play around if you want to play around with some side light. Like if you find some cool shadows, right, of like leaves coming like that, you can play around with the shadows for those as well. So I'm giving you, you know, anything from level 1 to level 3, right? Like how far you want to push it. So level 1 would be just get the exposure right. Go out there, properly expose for a backlight, properly expose for a front light. Simple as that. And then check and see if I was right with the 3-stop difference. If you want to push yourself like level 2, level 3, then with the backlight, mess around with the flare and see how you can play with that. See how you can push yourself. And then with the front light, purposely play with the shadows and see how that is. So I think that should give like you guys in all different ability levels to go out there and play and explore. So with that said, I'm going to take some questions. Latasha asked if I ever use an ND filter for full sun shots. And I saw somebody else ask if I use a polarizing filter. I have them both. I don't use them. If you know me, I'm a super lazy photographer. And I don't hide it at all. There's like pictures of me like with studio shoots where I'm just sitting in a director's chair, like, because at that point I'm just sitting there, you know. I use one body, one lens for the most part. The only time I do use ND filters is if I'm shooting video. And for anyone who shoots video, you'll know you are limited to your shutter speed. You can't, like you have to, your shutter speed is typically fixed at either 48th of a second or 1/25th of a second. And you can't choose any other one. So if I'm shooting out in full sun, like at a 1/25th of a second, like I'm not going to be able to take advantage of like my f1.0, right? I have an f1.0 lens. And if I want to shoot 1.0, I'm already at ISO 100. I am at f1. Being outside, I'm going to have to be at like 4,000th or 5, you know, like 4,000th or more, 8,000th of a second, right, to shoot outside. But with video, you can't do that. You have to be at 1/25th. So as a result, I do have to use an ND filter to take it down that many stops. But for photos, you don't need to. You have the luxury of, you know, choosing whatever shutter speed you want. Now, the only time you might want to use an ND filter is if you're trying to purposely catch motion blur. So let's say you're outside and you purposely want to shoot at 1/8 of a second. right? That's going to let in a lot of light. So you go F22, and if it's still too much light, then you might have to stop down with the ND filter. But I would imagine at F22, you should probably be okay as well. So hopefully I didn't overwhelm you with all that info right now, but I hope I answered the question to the people who asked about filters. How do you make sure the pictures have a similar look after editing with such different lighting situations in the same location? So for me, Sandra, like, one comes with how you expose for the photos. And then the other thing that really helps, like, I hate to seem like I'm pushing, but I do have presets. So my presets are, do give like a very consistent look to the edits once you put them on. So if I'll leave it in the comments in case, I'm trying to get you guys okay, anyway, if you look at the guides in our Facebook group, I do have a discount posted for the presets if you're interested. I think it's 20% off. Okay, this is like bothering me now. Okay, I can't find it at the moment, but I'll post it later. But it's in guides. You can look it up in guides. And that at least gives you, like, you know, a consistent look in the photo. What is flare? Is that light or is that just the mood? Flare is light coming directly into the lens. So flare was that's a flare, a sun flare, also like a sunburst. So that's what I mean by flare. But it can come in really artistically like this, but go try it today. Like, shoot where you actually let the sun come into your lens, and you'll see, like, it can also make everything very hazy and hard to focus and muddy as well. So another trick, if you're gonna try the flare, if you're gonna go out there and play with the flare for your backlight project, and your camera is not auto-focusing because it's too muddy, what I do is I'll take my hand and I'll actually physically cover the sun flare just to get the camera to focus first, and then remove my hand and then take it. And you'll even see the difference between the muddiness when you cover it versus when you uncover it. Okay, let's see. Do you have an example of F1.0? Yes, I do. Where was it? Let's see. It was the photo with side by side with the fitness guy. Where did? Okay, this one. This was shot at F1.0 on my X-T4. So I got the ring in focus, and then everything else just kind of goes really soft after that. If you look up on my, I have a blog post on this, where this entire session, but I shot the entire session on F1.0. Let me see if I can pull it up real quickly just to show you guys. Okay, here. Yeah, so this entire session was shot on F1.0, and you can see, like, just the amount of bokeh in the background. Look at that, like, that's like so buttery soft. Yeah, F1.0, bright sun, hot sun. And again, you can see I went for the backlighting and I exposed for them for the shadows. So that's why back there's a little bit hot. These are all f.1.0 as well. Just the amount of like bokeh you're able to get, right? So this one I focused on them, made the foreground go blurry. This one I did the opposite, focus on the foreground, made them go blurry in the back. And you can see the sun is kind of filtered through here, because otherwise it would have been a lot of sun, and then I would have gotten muddy instead, right? With this photo here, you can see how the sun kind of made, like the flare of the sun kind of made him disappear, but I love it because it looks like he's like floating, like he's coming out of like heaven or something. Like it's just so dreamy and abstract. This one, I controlled the flare by hiding it behind her head. So you can see there's a little bit coming through, but it's not too much, you know? So that way I was able to make sure that the ring stayed in focus, or not in focus, but like clear and not muddy, while still having that ethereal quality of this backlit. Yeah. So you can see what at f1.0, like make sure that their eyes are in focus and everything else can be soft focus. So I had a lot of fun with playing with the depth of field here.
Do you use a tripod on location?
This one, I did not use a tripod at all. I was just running. This one, I focused on like that strand of hair, you see, like, and I wanted everything else to just look a little bit like soft and dreamy and a little mysterious. And then a silhouette shot to just kind of end it. But yeah, love how this session came out. This session was shot entirely one camera, one lens, my X-T4 with the 51.0, and that was it. Some people ask like, well, how did you get shots like that? I call it a two-legged zoom. You just run far away
Absolutely.
from them, right?
That's the best trick, the 50mm, and you zoom with your feet.
Yep, exactly. But you get like just such,
Yeah,
I find that like that's like the perfect amount of it's the perfect amount of telephoto and bokeh, you know, but still allows you to connect with the client. Keep in mind, X-T4 is a crop sensor, so the 50mm is really more equivalent to like an 85 on here, just to keep in mind. So it would be more like using an 85, but yeah, so 1.0, it's crazy. Let's see. Oh, yay, Taylor says she loves my presets. I created that. When I had it created, it was really just to help my own workflow, to make my work look consistent. Oh, and this was all edited with the presets I was telling you guys about too. Yeah, all digital, edited with my presets. But I didn't intend to sell it. I created it for myself. I hired Refine Presets, a company, to make it for me. I was like, I need my film work and my digital work to look consistent. Like, can you personalize something for me? And then when we started testing it, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like, imagine how many people this would help. So then that's when we started testing it on other people's work too, just to make sure that it is consistent across the board like that. And then I was like, would you be open to making it available to other people? Because I really think this will help a lot of photographers. And so it makes me really happy when I see people, tell me how much it's helped them. But let's see, how long did it take you to get where you are confident in your photos? I like to say that I never consider myself there. I consider myself always a student, and I consider myself always room for growth. And I'm always looking for ways to challenge myself. And if any of you who have followed me long enough, you know that I thrive with challenges. That's why I'm putting these challenges out to you guys, because I think that's the best way to grow, and I get bored really easily. So I would say confidence comes with knowledge. So the more that you know, the more confident you are. And when you start to find yourself in situations where you know exactly what's happening, the confidence is just there. So if you are looking for more confidence, I would recommend loading up with more knowledge and experience as well. Experience also, knowledge and experience combined is what's going to give you a lot of confidence, right? And the example I gave is like, if you show up to a wedding and you've already shot at that venue before and you've already worked with the planner before, then you're very confident, right? You know where everything is, you know how it is, you know the people that you have to report to, and as a result, you're very confident. So if you're looking for ways to improve your confidence, what I recommend is pushing yourself to do something that's challenging. Because when you've achieved the challenge, it makes you feel more confident. That's why I'm giving you challenges these next 3 days. Because, for example, with yesterday, right? When you now know that you're able to create the different bokeh with the different settings, you get more confident. Today, when you walk out of today's challenge, knowing that you're able to shoot front lit or backlit, you're going to feel more confident. When you prove to yourself that the 3 stops works for front to backlit, you're going to feel more confident, right? So it's just really like empowering you with more tools, and that's how. And then using it in a situation where you, in a challenging situation. So for those of you who have been intimidated by shooting in high noon all this time, go out there and do it, and suddenly you're going to feel more confident. So that's my challenge to you for this one is, if you are in Pacific Standard Time, it's perfect. Right after we get off, go outside and start shooting because you're right in high noon now. If you are not, then do it tomorrow before we hop on to this call, right? So with that said, thank you all on the Facebook group. For the VIP people, hang on tight. And then I'll take your personal questions after this. But for everyone else on the Facebook group, a quick question from Claudia. Yes, my camera is set to full stops. Full stops just makes the adjustments a lot faster for me. So, all right, thank you guys all. So good to see you guys. I'll see you guys again tomorrow. In the meantime, go out there and test. Later this afternoon, again, I will start up the threads for our homework, and I can't wait to see all that you guys post. Can't go out there and play in the hot sun today. Okay, stop share. Stop live.